about being overwhelmed. When you're overwhelmed, just recognize it for what it is. Recognition is key. So when you're overwhelmed, just recognize it. You know, our thoughts are designed to serve us and not vice versa. Hence, think on purpose. So if you're overwhelmed and you don't know you're overwhelmed, you're going to stay in a state of overwhelmness because you're just going to be acting off the cuff, you know, just firefighting all the time, this, and you're not really maximizing your day. You're not really focusing and making the most of your time. So recognition is key. How do you know when you're overwhelmed? It's like you're doing one thing, then another thing, then another thing. But at the end of the day, there's no sense of accomplishment. There's no clear direction. You don't know actually what was done. You don't know what else is on your checklist. And so that's not a sustainable place for you to live. That's not even a healthy place for you to live. So recognize what being overwhelmed looks like. Recognize what it feels like. And when you can recognize what it is, then you can accurately, you know, apply a solution to it. You know, you eat an elephant the same way you eat a hot dog, the same way you eat, I don't know, a salad, one bite at a time. So when you're overwhelmed, recognize what overwhelmed is, recognize the feelings, emotions, and activities that come with overwhelmness. Take a moment, take a deep breath. Sometimes you take in that actual 5, 10 seconds, 5, 10 minutes, 60 minutes to just clear your head and get a clear plan, make a clear checklist, whether you write it out, whether you speak it into your phone, whatever you use. But you taking that time actually saves you time. Because when you don't take the time to recognize and see where you are so that you can begin to make a step out of that space of overwhelmness, you actually are going to make sure you stay in that overwhelmed sense. Just kind of taking laps around the same mountain, and you don't have to do that. So recognize what being overwhelmed is, recognize what it looks like, recognize what it feels like. That's one good thing about language. Instead of you just being confused or in a state of, I don't know, this is think on purpose. We're not going to be lazy thinkers here. If you want to be a lazy thinker and want someone else to do all the thinking for you, you're in the wrong group. You're in the wrong group. I love you much. I'm glad you're here, but you're in the wrong group. There's probably a better fit for you somewhere else. I mean, there's so many things on the internet. But here we're going to think on purpose, deliberately, intentionally, with direction. What do we intend to do? And we're going to train our thoughts to deal with that. So when you're overwhelmed, recognize, man, I'm overwhelmed. If you're overwhelmed, stop. Listen and stop. Breathe. What do I need to do right now? What needs to be done today? What needs to be done this week? Recognize what overwhelmed is, then breathe, slow down, and begin to answer those questions. And then look at what you're doing right now. Is what I'm doing right now going to help me accomplish what needs to be done today? Ask yourself the question. If it's not going to help you accomplish what needs to be done today, then stop. Handle what has to be done today. Then handle what has to be done this week. There's no sense in worrying about what's going to happen 2-3 weeks down the line if you haven't handled today. So recognize what overwhelmed is, and then begin to breathe and ask yourself those questions. What needs to be done today? What needs to be done this week? And then deal with those things. Deal with those things. And you know what happens? Those things begin to get off of your checklist. The weight of that begins to get off of your shoulders. And you're like, okay, I'm breathing now. Because also when you're in a state of overwhelmness, those around you are carrying the brunt of your overwhelmness. You'll be a little more irritable with your children. You'll be a little less engaged maybe with your spouse because you're so preoccupied. So when you're overwhelmed, just recognize it. It's not a bad thing to be overwhelmed. You know, the most successful people have been overwhelmed time and time again. It helped them develop some muscles. But the sooner you recognize that you're overwhelmed, the sooner you can exercise the mental muscles, emotional muscles, relational muscles, spiritual muscles even, to handle that. You know, handle and hold it. You got this, UCDI, you can do it. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, slow down and breathe. Ask yourself what needs to be done today, what needs to be done this week. And then the second thing you ask yourself is, what does it involve? What needs to be done today? If you need to pay a bill today, or there's something you need to do today, who does that involve? What does it involve? Does it involve you driving to a specific place? Does it involve you connecting, making phone calls or emails to certain people so that what needs to be done today is actually done today? What does it involve? Recognize what needs to be done, and then ask yourself, who does that involve? What does that involve? So you have an accurate sense. That way you're not trying to allot 30 minutes to something that's going to take 90 minutes. We're setting ourselves up for success here, man, not failure. We're going to do this thing, and we're going to kill it every single time, because we're going to recognize and think on purpose. It doesn't mean you're not going to be overwhelmed or flabbergasted or flustered. It just means you don't have to live in those places. You don't have to live in those places. Slow down and breathe. And then what can you do to increase its chances of success? If you know that somebody's going to need something from a store that you're at for your dinner this evening to be successful, pick it up for them. You're already there. Pick it up for them. So again, people are going back to school right now. People are getting new jobs. The summer, the feeling and the levity and the laughter, the joy of summer is kind of waning down. We've had some thunderstorms here in this region where we live, so people are getting prepared for the fall. And so they can be feeling overwhelmed by all the things that need to be done. Even in your professional life, there are going to be things that, deadlines are going to seem to come a little faster now. It's okay if you're overwhelmed. Just recognize it and then do what needs to be done. What can I do today to help this be successful? Who does it involve? What has to be done today? Don't get stuck thinking 2-3 weeks down the line. Deal with what needs to be done today. All right, so if you're overwhelmed, I just want to encourage you. It's all right. But recognize what overwhelmed is. Recognize the feelings, the emotions, and the behaviors that accompany when you're feeling overwhelmed. If you're overwhelmed, are you eating a gallon of ice cream? Not judging, I'm just saying, recognize the behaviors that come with it. And then once you recognize what that is and thinking on purpose, then we reverse engineer that puppy and we deal with the fact that, okay, this is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be done. This is what I can do here. This isn't even my business over here. That's a false responsibility. So I'm just going to throw that off. Yeah. Hey, let me just hit that before we go. You taking on others' emotional baggage or professional responsibilities, you taking on others' things that's outside of your grace, outside what you're called to do spiritually, that is going to help you be overwhelmed. It's going to help you be overwhelmed because you're doing something that has nothing really to do with you. You're not even supposed to be in that thing, So don't take on something that's not yours. If you're recognizing that you have about 4 or 5 things on your checklist that actually have nothing to do with you, or it's not your responsibility, don't take on false responsibility. Give that right back where it came from. Give it right back. If you're not graced for that, or that's something that you've agreed to do, or something that the Lord has called you to do, you give it back. Give it back. Recognize what helped you to feel overwhelmed and recognize what being overwhelmed is.